All right, Chris, my partner in crime here, man. We've got
Hey,
an amazing person, Brett Hurt. We're interviewing today and talking today about his story, and I'm excited as can be. Brett coming from California, right, Brett? Welcome to Ditch Digger CEO.
no, from beautiful Austin, Texas, actually.
Oh, that's right, Austin, Texas. I forgot.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I did live in the Bay Area with my beautiful wife for 4 years.
All
But
right.
been back in Austin for 20 years now.
Well, you tech guys, we just kind of lump you guys all into Silicon Valley.
Right.
We know that Austin's growing in an amazing way when it comes to technology, as many of the cities across the
Austin
country.
is the future of technology right now, for sure.
It's a beautiful town. I love Austin, Texas. But welcome to Ditch Digger CEO, where we interviewed some of the best entrepreneurs we can find that started in a small way and developed into one of the best in the country and the world. And boy, you know what? We've done our due diligence, and you're one of those, Brett. So we really
Thank you.
appreciate you spending your time today with us, telling your story. And you probably, if you know a little bit about our podcast, and I know you've done some amazing mentoring, and you're a great entrepreneur. So we learn as entrepreneurs by hearing other people's great stories from their tough times, their good times, where they started this mentality of that they can they have the nerve to go make a buck on their own, right? And build something. Right? So the American dream, I think, is alive and well. And we want to tell your story. So if you could start us off from, kind of the beginning where you got this idea that you knew how to make money and you could work hard as hard as you have to build something, even in tough times. That's our goal, to hear that story.
Great. Well, hey, first, thank you. Big fan of your podcast and some of the stories that are told. I was listening to the founder of Domino's, and that was very inspiring. What an incredible life story he has. So it's an honor to be on. Number two, just real quickly, speaking about entrepreneurship, a lot of people don't realize that in the past 3 years, there's been more small businesses founded than in any other year in the history of the United States. So that's a very underreported story. Doesn't really hit the headlines a lot, but how cool is that, right? So there's a lot of people that need this help, and I'm a product of many, many people that have believed in me. I'm super lucky to have been born in Austin, and to been born to parents that decided to become entrepreneurs back when I was just a baby. Much to, I think, some of their parents' chagrin. So, first of all, let me start with my parents, and then second of all, we'll talk about why I was lucky to be born in Austin.
Perfect.
So my parents, my mom graduated UT Austin, where I also went to undergrad and met my wife in 3 years with a perfect GPA, top of her class, with 2 majors. So she was incredibly studious, incredibly smart. Unfortunately, she's passed away. That's why I speak about her in this past tense. I miss her a lot.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. And she really wanted to spend a lot of time with me when I was born. And that's why, even though she'd gotten the dream job, and I put that in quotes, after graduating, because she was such a superstar graduate at UT, she decided to start a business with my dad. Now, my dad also went to UT. He is kind of like unfortunately, he's passed away too, but he was like a Lemony Snicket type of inventor. It was super fun growing up with him because he was always inventing really wacky things. His claim to fame is he invented the first halogen fishing light, which he sold all over the world. He had US as well as globally. It allowed him to do what he was passionate about, which is really spend time on the coast. He would fish 2 to 3 days out of the week. He passed away at 63. But when I was speaking about him passing away at that time, I said, look, he lived his whole life like he was on vacation. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He marched to his own drummer. So he, unlike my mom, was not studious on subjects he wasn't interested in. He wasn't a compliant type of person in that way. And he dropped out of UT. My mom would joke with me that she would hear the books literally hit his head as he fell asleep with boredom. And he was like, I can't do this, right? And so, the catalyst was born for them to be entrepreneurs, him being unemployable, my mom being incredibly employable, but wanting to really have the flexibility to spend a lot of time with me and then later my sister. So that for me as a kid growing up meant that I grew up with entrepreneurship being completely normalized. My parents had furniture businesses, retail stores. I grew up working in those stores, sweating in the hot Texas sun, helping my dad move furniture, talking with customers, really getting very hands on with retail. And you learn a lot in that. I will tell you, to be honest, there were lots of times where I was, complaining about it because it's hot and thinking, oh my gosh, this is such hard work. But at the same time, I was able to look back when I was in my 20s and be like, hey, my parents always took me along for the journey. There was no separation between kind of work and family. And what that did is it allowed me to really grow up in a way where I learned entrepreneurship, firsthand. And that was incredibly valuable to me and something that I've continued on with our kids ever since they've been born. I've had them show up at, the companies I've started. I've had them attend pitch meetings when we're thinking about making an investment in a company that I think they may be interested in. And that way for them, it's just normalized and they're incredibly entrepreneurial. I mean, my daughter came out with her first book when she was 13. She has a jewelry business. She has her own podcast called Radiant Resilience with Rachel Hurt. I would highly encourage you to listen to that. I'm on episode 7,
Wait, say that again. It's called what?
Radiant Resilience, and her name is Rachel Hurt. And I'm on episode 7, which my lucky number is 7. My blog is actually called lucky7.io. So she wanted to reserve that episode for me. She surprised me with that. I will tell you, in truth, that's my most difficult podcast episode in history because she knows everything about me, right? I mean, it's from your kids. They've studied you from literally the time they were born and they could ask you anything, right? And Rachel does not like to provide any questions in advance. So it was just open book, but I had a ton of fun with it. Our son, is just like me. I've been programming since I was 7 years old and he's been programming since he was 4. He's incredibly entrepreneurial. He's about to turn 15. And so for them, it's just been normalized and it's just like it was normalized for me. Now, secondly, growing up in Austin, why was I lucky on that front? UT Austin was one of the original universities to buy the Cray supercomputers. That got a lot of the technology researchers to move here to be able to use them. They then spun out companies from UT that birthed our tech ecosystem here. That happened before I was born. And when I was 7 years old, like I said, I started programming and it allowed my mom, who saw that I very quickly became absolutely obsessive about it. I programmed over 40 hours a week from age 7 to 21. So literally my whole childhood. To be able to drop me off at things like user group meetings. And those actually existed in Austin where there were programmers that would meet up and help each other. And how lucky was I to be born in an environment like that? Because I'm 52 now. This was in 1979 when I started programming. So starting in 1982, she would take me to these user group meetups of programmers. They were all there to learn from each other. I was always the youngest guy there. And I was learning from a lot of the people that became legendary, including the Bitmap brothers, who have created a lot of video games. And I continue to see their titles from time to time on different video game platforms. So I knew them back when I was just a little kid. One of my nicknames back then was Mickey Mouse because I hadn't hit puberty yet. So that was just, entrepreneurship is always grit and luck, as I'm sure you would agree. And I was really lucky to be born at the right time, right moment in history, with the right passion, to the right parents who fostered that sense of entrepreneurial can-do-ism in me from very early on. And I feel very blessed, and I've been doing my best to pass on those blessings and those learnings to our children. And as you know, I came out with a book called The Entrepreneur's Essentials. And one of the things I did with this book is that I gave it away for free at the entrepreneursessentials.com. I think it was the first book you could chat with from an AI perspective. So you can query it there. My son created an AI this summer called Brett GPT, where all of the writings, all of the speeches, all of the podcasts I've ever been on, he fed into that. And you can have a virtual conversation with any content I've written. It's pretty fascinating because there were speeches in there I've given, 15 years ago that I'd forgotten about that come up from time to time when I query it myself. It's almost like having my own knowledge base to learn from past Brett
Sure.
as well. So,
Love it.
so I gave that book away for free to do what you're doing here, which is do your best to help a lot of entrepreneurs. And I get a real helper's high when I get texts from people or emails from people saying that my book made a real difference to them in their life. And the people that do buy it on Amazon, all the proceeds go to benefit female entrepreneurs. So I don't make a dime from it.
I love it. Now, I like that term helper's high. I've never heard that before, but that, we get so much by giving, and sometimes you don't realize it until you actually reach out and do something for somebody, right? Or you purposefully do something to make a difference. And that feeling afterwards is something you don't get by
Shout out
receiving.
to my CEO coach for 16 years now, Kirk Dando, who's the author of a great business book called Predictive Leadership. He's who I got the helper's high from. I've always called him the company whisperer.
I love it.
Horse whisperer that I think that was Robert Redford, but he's just been a huge part of my success as well.
Kurt Dango, is it KURTDANGO?
KIRKDANDO.
KIRK.
Yeah.
Okay, Kurt.
DANDO. Yep. And his
You
book
know,
is Predictive Leadership. Yeah.
I like it. You have to get that one too.
Yeah, but that's where I got the helper's high term from. He taught me that because I was like, why do you like doing this so much? And that's why. And I get it. Once I started to help entrepreneurs myself, I learned pretty quickly why he loves it.
So let's hear about your start as a kid. What you did to make a buck to understand the thrill of serving somebody and getting compensated for that, right? And then where it went to as you started your business at a young age of 24, and you built so many amazing businesses, right? And 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, and not just like little businesses that stayed little, like I was used to building. I was used to building businesses. Hey, if I could do a few $1,000,000 in revenues and make a couple $100,000, I'm kind of happy. And I built a bunch of those, and that eventually, gosh, why not? How do I build $100 million business or $1 billion business, right? But you've done a handful of businesses and many with great success. If you could start with kind of where it started and how you started that first business or that first vision and then the next couple.
You bet. I mean, so, again, starting out, I was just working for my parents. But I've got a lot of great memories from that, helping my dad with his fishing light labels and packing and shipping and, seeing him walk into fishing retail stores like a celebrity. I mean, everybody loved him. He was larger than life. And he was a real hero to them in that industry. And it was different.
But did you see though, Brett, did you see the beginnings of that? Were you too young to see him when he was, banging his head against the wall and people probably saying, it's never going to work. Right. And, and then those,
I saw my parents go through a lot. I mean, I remember when their business almost went out of business, their furniture stores. They were very, very tough times. They would talk very openly about that to me. There wasn't this, again, separation of like, well, he's too young to hear that. It's just everything was out in the open. And so that normalized it for me. I'm the same way with our kids for anything about my business. And that, that's the right way to grow up because, and I, by the way, I don't think that's an intuitive way to grow up. Like a lot of people think what you do at work should just stay at work. And then, a lot of children do not even know what their dad does, or if they know what their dad does, they know that their dad doesn't like what he does. Like one of the things that was very formative for me growing up as a kid is my dad, being larger in life, sometimes would like to embarrass me and he would, drive up to the schoolyard with his truck loaded up with furniture, roll down the window and yell, "Furniture for sale," right? It's like looking, and that was like him picking me up, right?
I love it.
And of course, I was horrified and embarrassed as as a kid, but he was just having a lot of fun. But I really just I learned a lot from my friends saying to me, "I love your dad," and I was like, he's my dad, right? So for me, I was like, really? It's like,
That's my,
you
yeah, that's
know,
just my,
you love my dad? When do you love my dad? And I was like, or what do you like about my dad so much? And they're like, well, he just seems like he's just has so much fun in what he does for work. I said, yeah, he really does. Doesn't mean that I haven't seen hard times, but he really does. Um, and I'm like, what about your dad? My dad just complains about his work all the time. He doesn't like it at all. And, there's TV shows like The Office and and things like this about people that really don't love their work. Um, and I, was very fortunate to be exposed to parents who decided, look, we're just going to work on things we're passionate about. And that's how we're going to spend our life. And that is super lucky, but that doesn't mean it's easy. There were a lot of times where I saw us almost go out of business and those were scary. And then there were a lot of lessons along the way where my dad got the offer from Walmart to sell his fishing lights in all of the Walmart stores, and it would have been a huge scale up moment for him. And I've always been hyper ambitious. That's just hardwired into me. Um, like much more ambitious even than my parents. If my parents were alive today, they would tell you this. But they, when my dad got that offer from Walmart, he turned them down. And I was 10 years old and we sat down at a small table and I was so frustrated. I was like, Dad, how could you do this? Like this is your chance to go so big. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, son, you may realize the value of keeping life simple one day, or you may not. That's your choice.
mm,
I'm going to keep it simple. Um, my life is anything but simple. It's pretty complex. I've got my hands in a lot of different things, like I think you do, Gary.
mm,
But I really enjoy that and I'm really ambitious and that's who I am. That's my core nature. My dad's core nature is he did not want everything to be completely consumed by business. But look, I learned a lot of things growing up. I learned a lot of things in terms of serving customers and everything else that it took me a while to become an entrepreneur, just to answer that part of your question directly, because I got so infatuated with programming that I dedicated all of my time outside of school to that. I did it over 40 hours a week, as I mentioned. And I created a lot of technology that people used. I created one of the first bulletin board systems when I was 10 years old. That became the most popular BBS in Austin. That was a forum where people would connect via modem. This was pre-internet, where they could post in message boards. We could play online games together. It was really, really cool experience for me. I created one of the first internet games when I was 18.
wow.
That became supposedly one of the most popular internet games online by the time I was 20. By the time I was a junior, there was even a conference around it that I didn't have any money, but people would fly me to speak. And that game was called Renegade Outpost. It ran for a long time, like well after
Oh,
I passed the torch on that. I never made any money from that or my BBS. Um, and, I got really lucky in the sense that when I was about to begin my junior year at UT Austin, one of my friends called me up that was 6 years older. I had helped him set up a BBS when he was young. But again, he was 6 years older than me. And he said, hey, I remember you and I remember how great of a programmer you are. What are you up to now? And I'm like, I'm at UT, about to begin my junior year. And he's like, have you kept up your programming skills? I'm like, that's all I do. told him about my internet game. He's like, well, do you want a job? I'm at this company called Anderson Consulting and I would like to hire you. I said, well, I'm beginning my junior year at UT. And he's like, that's all right. So I did that full time while I was going to UT. And that gave me this passion for technology consulting pretty early on.
So was it like a 10 or 20 hour a week part-time job because you have to schedule at college, right? It was a real job, 40 hours plus a week on
Oh,
top of your.
it was a full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked 30 to 40 hours a week on it while going to school. And a lot of my friends were jealous because they were like, how did you get that job? And it was because of that karma of helping him out when I was a kid, frankly,
Yeah.
that he remembered me. Karma's played a huge, huge role in my life. But that took me into when I graduated, I had such a great skill set from that I went to go work for Deloitte Consulting. I really considered starting my own business at that point, but I just didn't quite feel ready for it. So I went to Deloitte Consulting. About a year into that, I was doing great there, but I was like, gosh, it's time for me. I need to be an entrepreneur. I was looking for a way to become one. And Deloitte had a program where they would pay for your school if you got into a top 10 MBA program. I got into the Wharton School. At that time, it was rated the number one business school for 6 years in a row by Business Week. I wrote all of my essays about starting my own business. And I started my first business in my first semester at Wharton, getting my MBA. And I called it Herd Technology Consulting. Not a lot of imagination in that name. But I leveraged Wharton undergrads in this program called Wharton Management and Technology, which is the top 1% of all people that get into Wharton. It's an amazing undergrad program. It's number one in the country to this day. And I had them working for me and we did all types of technology builds, and made a lot of money. I was making $250 to $350 an hour. And at that point, I knew that I was never going to go back to Deloitte and make 1/10 of what I was making on my own, doing essentially the same thing, but without the brand name of a Deloitte, my own brand name. But I had the right time, right skill set to be able to do that. And that's why I was able to make that per hour.
And
And
then this was, what year was it? What year about was this?
this started in 1997. I got my MBA from 97 to 99. And it felt very freeing because I have always told people, look, if you want to be an entrepreneur, one of the easiest ways to get the CEO title, start your own company and do something you already know how to do for someone else. As long as it's something the world really values at that moment in history, then you can make a lot of money on it and you can start to earn your entrepreneurial stripes. And you'll make tons and tons of mistakes, but I'm a big fan of reading a lot of books and I've read, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of business books. But at the same time, like you've got to learn by doing. So it's like while you're reading those books, if you're actually doing. So one of the things that I really believe is that a lot of the lessons that I was learning at Wharton in my classes really stuck with me because I was literally building businesses the entire time I was at the Wharton School.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, let's think of a 27-year-old kid basically, or 26, 27, whatever you were, right? To make that kind of money back then. That's
I was
like,
24 when I started. I was one of the younger Wharton undergrads.
so,
And I
so
graduated.
to be a 24, 25-year-old kid making that kind of money could be compared to, whatever, $700, $800 probably today, right? An hour. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was pretty awesome. There's more money than I ever made. And when my wife and I got married, I went into Wharton already married. We've been married 28 years. Her name is Deborah and my soulmate. I had $1,000 when we got married and she had 2,000. And I always joke with friends, I married the wealthier woman. So that was literally our entire net worth, right? Was $3,000. And I would joke with her. I would be like, we can buy a lot of boxed ramen now. Right. But that was how it all started. It all started in that type of way. And
So how
so it felt
cool is
like
it?
a ton of money for us.
How awesome is it, right, to be married to your like you said, right, your soulmate and to for you guys to go through all this together and you two to be able to look back and say, remember when, honey, remember when, or when you're going to you have a nice meal and it's cost a few $100, you're like, remember when we couldn't do this, or remember when, this would be maybe something we do once or twice a year, right? I mean, that's fun it's fun to look back with that partner that you love so much and be able to, to be able to celebrate, right? The opportunities
Absolutely.
and the blessings you have, right?
Yeah, we talk
And
about it all the time. Yeah. And we never take anything for granted as a result of that because we're used to not having anything. As a matter of fact, we waited for 8 years after we got married to have kids. People say they have no regrets in life. That's one of my regrets. We have two amazing kids. I love our kids. Um, and I'm in the best shape of my life. So all that's great. But I wished I'd believed a little bit more in myself in terms of financially it working out. But I waited until we were 32 because I wanted to feel very financially stable before having children. And if I could go back and do it over again, probably would have had them at like 26, 27, right? And not avoided.
yeah,
So,
well,
but
there's huge positives from either side, right? So I
yeah,
didn't know I didn't know how to stop that. I got married and my wife was pregnant in a blink of an eye, and we had
there you
three
go.
kids. We had three kids by the time we were
Yep.
26, I think. And and we adopted later on, 10, 12 years later.
Yep.
But our fourth. But bottom line is, you wouldn't have any other way, right? And then, but guess
Oh
what?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I
You
felt
know,
very blessed, but it's if anybody's listening to this and thinking about it, like my advice would be, have kids early, and just believe in yourself entrepreneurially that it's going to work out. Because one of the things that that happens when you have kids is that, man, I got so hyper efficient after children. Oh my gosh, so hyper efficient because you want to be able to spend that time with them, right? They're only that age once. And so a lot of time, frankly, was wasted, like, growing. I mean, I was always very entrepreneurial since the time I was 24, but I could have been much, much more efficient, right? And having kids forces you to figure out how to be a ruthless.
well, I for sure for me, right? I was inspired so much after I saw my son was born, and man, I got this little guy in my arms, and
Yep.
I come home after a hard day at work, and I'm crawling around the floor with him, and it just inspired me to focus, like you're saying, so much more, and inspired me to say, okay, how do I enjoy this family more, and how do I serve this family, and make sure I can pay for a college education for this little guy someday, right?
Yep.
And then,
I imagine.
yeah, I mean, so I agree 100%. I mean, don't think that you have to be wealthy to have kids, right? You're
Right.
part of wealth is that love of your family that propels you, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I love how you say that.
I had Rachel in my arms. She was about the length from, the tip of my fingers to my elbow, just holding her. And I was 32. I just started up Bizarre Voice, which means voice in the marketplace, which is my fifth business in my history. I'm on my sixth now. And I looked at her and I'm like, I've got to make this work, for you, for our now family. And that turned into over $1 billion outcome. So, but I
Yeah.
mean, I got so much more efficient after she was born and so much more focused.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that focus thing, because you mentioned something earlier that triggered, something in my life. I loved paving parking. I love the asphalt paving and concrete paving. I love serving my customers, and I love being in it, right? Actually pouring concrete and paving asphalt, running pavers, running graders, right? That was, I was at a pinnacle in my life when it came to, being able to perform for my customers on the biggest parking lots and everything else. And I did that for about 20 years. And then through some problems and challenges, I was kind of forced to get out of the day-to-day business and focus on the vision. And
Mhm.
and I didn't like that I was forced out of it. That's a long story on why. But boy, that got me to understand, for me to grow this thing and create more opportunity, I couldn't be in the business any longer. I couldn't be, shoveling asphalt and finishing concrete any longer, right? So I think about what you said. You love programming. and you're programming for crazy hours on a weekly basis for such a it's such a young person. It was ingrained in you, and you loved it. You were great at it. What gave you the ability to see beyond that, see through the forest, right? And
Yeah.
to a vision that you ended up, many visions you end up creating.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question because I see it now with our son, because he's been programming since he was 4. School for him is a big distraction. He wants to just spend all of his time programming, and he really does. Um, and he does great at school. He's 99% IQ, and he can get things done pretty quickly to just get back to programming. But one thing that I have in common with all the tech entrepreneurs I know is we all grew up reading sci-fi, and
Mm,
all were dreaming about how to create a better future. Now a lot of sci-fi is dystopian. That's why there was all this AI paranoia, the AI moratorium call and everything when ChatGPT first came out, because people are playing the Terminator or the Matrix scenario or whatever dystopian sci-fi scenario to it, which I think is pretty silly. We could get into that. My current company, data.world, is really leading with AI. But I grew up with this dream of creating a better world through technology, and science fiction was constantly reinforcing that to me. And as you know, when you get your hands dirty doing something, and in my case, my hands were actually very clean, except for working my parents because it was just typing. But I was creating a lot of things in the virtual world that, would come to be pretty significant. Like bulletin board systems were the original form of online communication between people. My internet game, I mean, gaming is a huge industry. It's much bigger than, the movie industry. And so by doing and having those science fiction dreams, as a young kid, um, you eventually start to develop pattern recognition to be able to predict where the future is going to go. I've always believed a lot of the most genius people in the world are those science fiction writers, because they are literally envisioning like what
yeah,
is it going to be like in 50 years. And sometimes they're writing it to say like, hey, if we're not cautious, it'll be that world. We got to keep things on the rails. And they're actually providing a public service by doing that.
sure.
Um, because you've got to be intentional with how you create things, and how you align as a society on making sure things don't go off the rails. But we always muddle our way through that with humanity one way or another. And I think we're living in a better world now by far than we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And I'm a big fan of books like Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. My son and I just finished Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Nearer. This is a book that came out 3 weeks ago. And his 2005 book called The Singularity is Near had a huge impact on me. And he's been maybe the most important AI prognosticator. And so, look, it's got to be out of a genuine passion. I learned that from my dad. And my son, I do not have to encourage to program. Okay. And our daughter really doesn't want to program. She wants to write, and she wants to speak, and she wants to sell jewelry and build jewelry. And like, that's what she loves. And one of the things that I learned from my mom, and the reason that I dedicated my book to my mom as well as to my wife, because they're the two strongest women, and the two people I've learned the most from, is that my mom, growing up at age 7, starting to program in Texas, not playing football, meant that I got picked on a lot at that time. Now it's different, right? Now it's like tech is like ruling the world, and people that do tech early on in their childhood are seen as like childhood geniuses and yada, yada, yada. But when I was growing up, it was not. It was, that was like, you're around the same age as me. So it was like the revenge of the nerds era, right? Um,
Especially
and
especially in Texas, everything's football there, right?
everything is football, and it's like a big religion.
Yeah,
And so I was picked on a lot for being different. And even my third grade teacher pulled my mom aside at one point, and she said, "Hey, I want you to know your son's going to be a loser. Like all he does in class about computers. And she said, I'm really worried about him. He has no sense of balance. And my extended family felt the same way. And the amazing thing about my mom is that she would always say like, and she, by the way, she didn't even tell me that story until I was in my 20s, but she saw me become successful, so, but she told me how angry she was at that teacher. But, when you're passionate about something, you naturally will do it. And my mom would say to them, look, he's found his passion. Everything's going to be fine. Just let him do. Let him be. And there was so much wisdom in that. Cause think about how many parents will pivot from one thing to another. I mean, do you remember like the parenting craze of like, everybody should learn Mandarin now because, China is going to be the future. Or, there was a time where one of my friends, this was about 18 years ago, said, I told my son he can no longer program. I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, how could you do that? And he's like, all the jobs are going to go to India. All the jobs are going to go to India. There's not going to be any programming jobs anymore in the US. Everything's going to be offshore. And I'm like, I think you're making a huge mistake, man. That's like your child's passion. You
Wow,
should
yeah.
tell him what he can and cannot do with, especially when he's doing very productive work like that. It's not like he's wasting his life. He's like, nope, not let him do it. There's not going to be jobs there. Well, that was obviously, I told him he was stupid at the time. It was a horrible mistake. And so my whole point as a parent has been expose our kids to a lot of different things. And then once they find what they're passionate about, let them do it without prejudice. And so our son, given that he's been programming so long and he reads lots of sci-fi and dreams a ton about the future, is really just to encourage that and
Well,
foster.
he is a mini me, man. That's amazing.
He is, but I don't have to.
It's not like you're forcing it on him. Yeah, he's inspired by what you've done, and he loves you a lot, and he wants to follow that. That's an amazing.
It's a really special relationship. And
If you're a drug dealer, it might be a problem. When you're a guy
Yeah.
creating amazing solutions, it's awesome for the future of our country.
Yeah, but yeah, and certainly I wouldn't encourage drug dealing. But I mean, one thing that it's complex as a parent, right? Because Steven Spielberg, when he was growing up, he was just fascinated with watching movies, just absolutely fascinated about it. And there were some parents who would be like, "Hey, you're wasting your time," blah blah blah, right? But I bet you that I don't personally know him. I've met him before, but I couldn't say I know him. I bet you, that he was really breaking down and analyzing and like really understanding scripting and, thinking like that. And his parents probably saw that, right? And,
Sure.
and let him really practice that. I mean, Michael Dell is a friend of mine in Austin. I'm a huge fan of him. He's a big hometown hero for us in Austin. And his parents, he really wanted to drop out of college, and his parents really wanted him to be, a doctor. And they set this crazy goal for him where like, look, if you can sell like, $700,000 or I think it was about $300,000 of computers this summer, because that's what you wanted to drop out to do, then we'll leave you alone. I think he sold like $700,000 that summer and he dropped out of UT, and that was the birth of L, right? So,
It's
I think
like in when I see like even in my industry, right? I see people that are blue collar start in my industry because they love it so much. They love even though they don't understand, they love the engineering side. They don't want to go to college, but they love building things, right? It's kind of the mind of an engineering mind that likes getting their hands dirty. And boy, you know what? Our world needs that. I mean, and today we pay more money to those people that learn to run the complex equipment. We have equipment that uses 3D technology and great electronic systems and all that. They take a mind of a little bit of technology to be great at, and then they're also people that kind of like getting their hands dirty. So the combination is so hard to find that these people are paid more than a CFO that's hired by a mid-sized company, right? For out of high school, or let's say within a few years of high school, making a couple $100,000 a year. And so, when I hear schools or teachers or parents saying, you don't want to do that dirty business, right?
Right.
Maybe you do, maybe they do. And that's okay because the opportunities are abundant because there's just not enough people wanting to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree with you. I think it's really, it's tough as a parent, but I think it's a real disservice if your child is truly passionate about something and you can tell they're truly passionate about it and it is productive work, right? Of any stripe. Forget about how much money it's going to make
Yeah, true.
and just believe enough in them that they're going to figure that out. And if you're worried about them being differentiated in it or whatever else, well, then your job is to expose them to people that are the best in that work that you know, network your way to them, and then allow your child to meet with them, like help open up doors for them. Because one thing I know about entrepreneurs that I absolutely love is most entrepreneurs are givers. And when someone approaches them, Steve Jobs, when he was a kid, he was struggling on building this type of transistor. And he told this story in the lost archives of Steve Jobs. I think it's Santa Clara University. If you want to look that up on YouTube, I reference it in my book. But he looked in the phone book. He kind of joked that back then there were phone books. And he looked up, I think it was Dave Hewlett, and called him up and said, "Hey, I'm working on this transistor, et cetera." I mean, this is a kid. And he's like, "Would you be able to provide me some advice?" He's like, "Come over to my garage tomorrow." And Steve Jobs was a nobody. He had no name. But, if you're an entrepreneur and you get a call like that, and you can tell this is someone really driven, and you're not going to get a lot of calls from someone that young that's like really into it, you're probably going to say yes, right? You're probably going to spend the time because you're going to see like someone really hustling early on, really passionate about something early on, and you could make a huge difference in their life. And by the way, there are many, many people that have done that for me, starting with my mom. And so I'm a product of so many people that have invested in me, that have believed in me, that have given me different lessons. So that's just an absolute blessing.
So I love it. I love how you say this, Brent. But I believe if you want to be great at something, if you got a passion for something, you want to be great at it, and work your butt off to
Absolutely.
connect to great, right? Because as you said, anybody that's great at what they do, if you're one of the best in your industry, in the world, or in your community, I use I did exactly this with the telephone books when I was a kid starting my business. I looked at the biggest ads and said, they're paying the biggest money to advertise in the Chicagoland market. They must be the biggest. And I would go visit their yards, visit their
Yeah.
sites, understand what type of equipment are they using. What type of culture am I seeing,
Yeah.
right? And then eventually that turned into, 15, 20 years later, I'm reaching out to the best minds in the world that I could find in that same industry, right?
Yeah.
Because if you want to be the best, then you got to understand what the best looks like. And in almost all industries, there's somebody out there that's looked upon as the best. Maybe it's 100 companies like that. Maybe it's one. But
Right.
as you said, just like we're talking today, your time is worth a ton, tens of thousands of dollars per hour, in my opinion, to hear your story. Okay, you don't do this because I'm paying you. You do. I don't do this because anybody's paying me.
Right.
We do this because we love this entrepreneurial world we're part of, and that we're blessed with, and we want to see other people that have a passion, expose that passion to be the best they can be. And so what you're
Absolutely.
saying is so true, that whenever I reached out to somebody I thought was the best in their industry, it might take a while to get through to them, right? But once you do, they are so open to
Yeah.
explain their journey. And boy, how can you have any better education than that?
Yeah.
So
I mean, beautiful. I mean, I love that you did that. And I've done the same since I was a kid. I've encouraged the same in our children. And, fortunately, I've been a successful entrepreneur. And, way, way past those days when we had $3,000 of net worth. And, now my wife and I are investors in 137 startups and
that's
44 VC
amazing.
funds, and have been doing all types of startup investing for a long time. 95% of my career time is spent as CEO of data.world. But Bizarre Voice was a real, dream come true entrepreneurially. And so with that network, I open up doors for them to learn from others. And there's lots and lots of people out there that are givers, but there's a lot of people they learn from that they've networked to on their own.
Okay,
And
so I'm going to tell you a quick story because this has all happened in the last 2 weeks. Okay,
yep.
what you're saying right now is exactly what is propelling my one business. Number one, it's AI driven. It's called Site Technology. We fly properties all over the world.
Hmm.
We're great at pavements, but we found the experts in roofing and facades, and now we're looking at landscapes. But because we're experts in pavements, we want to serve our customers better than anybody else in the world. And so my son, who loves technology as you do, right, understands the blue collar side of our business because he grew up in it, but he
Yep.
loves technology. He brought drones into our business, right, to where we can fly properties with drones instead of flying engineers all over the country looking at our customers' parking lots. He started using drones. Soon after, him and I both, started digging into this AI thing that you're so familiar with. If I had you back then on my team, we would have been a lot further along. But bottom line is, we started reaching out to my YPO friends that understood AI or had invested in AI, and then we started understanding the foundation of how they built their businesses around AI. And we started building this company using artificial intelligence to assess the condition. First, the greatest minds we could find in engineering of pavements, combined with artificial intelligence, machine learning experts, right, to start building this program. Well, we built it really well, so well that Walmart thinks it's one of the best technologies they've seen. The Walmart facilities leader said it's one of the best technologies they've seen in decades. Prologis uses this tool every day for 100% of the real estate. All right, but guess what?
Oh,
What are we
Prologis
doing?
is one of our customers at data.world too, and one of our investors as well.
One of my investors too.
Oh,
You know
very
Will.
cool.
Will O'Donnell.
Yeah, he's a very close friend. He's been incredibly helpful to data.world. But yeah, that's
That's
that's really cool. By the way, as you were speaking, I just want you to know that I don't think you could script a better background for your son for how the world has evolved, like having a blue collar knowledge base combined with technology and AI. Because here's the reality, like, of course, the tech companies are going to lead with AI, right? Because again, we've been reading sci-fi since we're growing up, like we dream about technology. So we're always going to lead. We're going to be the early adopters and the innovators in that. But you apply the lift, the massive productivity lift you're going to get from AI to other businesses that are a little bit more sleepy from an innovation standpoint. I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I just mean, you know, they're a little bit more set in their ways. Like paving's always been done like this or that. And I'm sure you're a great innovator in it. I can already tell you are, but that is a absolutely stellar background for how the world, I mean, for what
so.
the world needs right now. Your son is perfectly
So
positioned.
here's what we only got like 10 or 15 more minutes, and we'd love to be able to, and you get to let us know offline if you'll do a second phase of this. Sometimes we do a part B, okay? Because I
Okay.
want to hear your story, and we're not going to get to your story enough, right? But I think this has got us to a point where I just want to talk about this. What you mentioned about reaching out to great minds that are leaders and having them respond positively is such a no brainer in the life that we
Yeah.
have as entrepreneurs. Okay.
By the way, chapter, I think it's 5 or that maybe it's 7, but one of the early chapters in my book is, let's see. I'm sorry. It's chapter 9, how and why to ask for help. That gives all the tips on actually how to network your way to
Perfect.
those people. And
Perfect.
I tell the story of a guy named Aaron Hoffman, who is one of the best entrepreneurs I know. And when I used to live in Silicon Valley, I was born here in Austin. My wife and I, we founded a company called Core Metrics, which became a big company that IBM owns today. That was before Bazaar Voice and the original Innovator in web analytics. Our offices were right next to each other in San Francisco. And he would invite me to his breakfast meetup where there was always a speaker. And his breakfast meetup, everybody was older than us. We were very young. I was like 26. He was 24 back then. And there were these luminaries in Silicon Valley. And I'm like, Orange, how the heck do you have these people there? Like, we're like the biggest losers here. I was kind of, just joking around, but I was being serious at the same time, just profile wise. Right. And he was like, I approached them with a very research perspective. And I asked them really provocative things to meet up. And you know what? They say yes, because
Show up.
less than 1% of people that ever reach out to you are going to reach out in that way. And like, here I am as a pretty prominent tech CEO now. I've been, an entrepreneur since I was 24. and I'm 52. And I can tell you that my data is less than 1% of the time when someone reaches out to me, have they done even an iota of research on me? And my book's available for free online. I've been on many podcasts. I've got, a blog that I write on all the time. I'm on Medium, like LinkedIn, I write on. So that'd be like the most easy guy to kind of simply understand. Um, and, when you find that person that's in that less than 1%, which reaches out in that way, it's very hard to say no because it shows that they actually give a shit, right?
Yep,
That actually
exactly.
enough to do the homework, to reach out with an informed perspective.
So,
Write about that in that chapter.
so I'm telling you, I want to read that. I got to read your book. I did see that you wrote this book earlier, and I want to read it. Okay. But I got to tell you, I did exactly like we're saying, okay, because I'm blessed with this network as you are. In business, you get blessed with the network of great leaders because you're curious, right?
Yep.
Well, I got to know a friend of mine who supports my foundation, who shows up to everything I do. He's from the Chicagoland area. And he helped build the biggest landscaping company in the world. Now, he wasn't the founder, but he's one of the main people behind building it to a $3.5 billion landscaping business. And so guess what? We needed to find in my company Site Technology, I want to find the best minds in the world when it comes to landscape architectural and the commercial, industrial type of space. I want to find the best architects, the best arborists, the best soil scientists, the best environmental scientists, right? So who do I call? My buddy James, who's been in this business for 40 years, helped build the biggest company in the world. And he knows all these people, right? Like they're his friends.
Right.
So sure enough, I've had calls over the last couple of weeks, my son and I, with these experts. And man, it's so exciting to know that when we built our paving side, we've got engineers from Germany, Israel on the pavement side, the best in the world when it comes to concrete pavements and asphalt pavements. Now on roofs, we've done the same thing. On landscaping, a place I know nothing, really very little about. We're very confident right now that when Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Prologis, when you look across the table and our experts that build this AI, they're going to say, of course, how can I not use this company? We've got $2,000, $3,000 an hour consultants, the best in the world on the team that built this AI, right? And again, could never do that if I didn't understand the secret to exactly what you said, right? Why go small? I could have found my friends that are running, $100 million landscape companies, or I could as well to landscape architectural conferences, however, right? But to find the best and biggest in the world, they're going to know the names of who they've used across the globe.
Absolutely.
So it's
Yeah,
fun,
they're
right?
successful. Yeah, it's super fun. And, I remember when Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were on stage and talking about like, what are the traits that really make people successful? And the number one that they decided on was curiosity, right? And, gosh, it's just such an easy time to learn right now. Especially with AI. Like if you're not using ChatGPT or Claude from Anthropic multiple times a day, like you should be. I mean, we went to Japan on our family vacation. Of course, I use it all the time for work, but we are an AI solution at data.world too, in the data space for our enterprise customers. But one of the things that'll just blow your mind is, with GPT 4.0 and all these now multimodal GPTs, we'd be in a Zen Buddhist temple in Japan, snap a photo of an obscure piece of artwork, ask ChatGPT for the origin story behind it, and boom, get a distilled report that's like better than any travel guide probably would give you in this remote, Zen Buddhist temple, right? And so it's just such an incredible time for you to be able to learn anything. I mean, like you could literally spend hours just chatting with my book, which is like a free coaching set. I don't actually coach or charge for coaching, but you could literally spend like hours and hours just conversing with my book, like to learn about entrepreneurship. So it's just, for the curious mind, this is the best time to be alive by far. And it's the easiest network too. I mean, almost everybody's on LinkedIn and everything else.
So think about this, okay? Easiest time, as you're saying, right? I've got customers that run big facilities. That's our biggest customers, whether it's 1 million square foot facility or a billion square feet of industrial and retail buildings. Okay. And before they would have hundreds of people that oversee this the process of facilities management, pavements, roofs, all the things that we do, plumbing, electrical, all the things that they have to do. Right. And so very seldom are they experts in many things. And so
Hmm.
they have to rely on contractors and people they're paying to be kind of their experts. Right. Sometimes they hire engineers to come in and do the boots on the ground walks of the property to tell them everything they have, all the challenges they have ahead, and then just clear specifications maybe of what they have to do to fix things or maintain things. Right? You have that all in one place with what we're building. Right? In pavements, it's done, and roofing, it's done, and facades and landscaping, it's going to be done. But it basically allows a person that cares about their property and wants to be as efficient as possible operating that property.
Hmm.
It basically makes them an expert in at this point, roofing, pavements, in
That's
the near
awesome.
future, facades and landscaping. Eventually, it's going to be mechanical. It's going to be everything, right? And makes them an expert. The best engineers in the world are at their beck and call through AI, right? And so, I mean, I'm excited as can be because it's changing
That's
an
awesome.
industry from being a very blind industry with mediocrity doing work for them to now it's going to be if you don't have the best product and the best people doing your work, it's going to be seen immediately. There's nowhere to hide on a bad product from warranties. You're going to have warranties that with let's say monthly or annual flights, right? You're going to see every little nook and cranny of problems that come up that get called out that you'd never see before, right? So it's just like you're saying, it's such an exciting time to be alive. But I got to tell you, I know you only got about 5 more minutes. So what I'd like to do is this: if you do this, maybe just kind of go over the businesses in 5 minutes. That's elevator.
Sure.
What you built, what you're doing today. Kind of the startups and the sales, the businesses, and what you're doing today. And then I'm going to beg you to do 1 more hour on those businesses and where they've
Yeah.
gone and how they got there. Is that okay?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So just starting from the first business, her technology consulting, building a lot of the early internet websites, applications. Um, Again, right skill set at the right time. Most people did not have that skill set. Those Wharton, M&T undergrads were incredible. I would pay them around 25, $30 an hour, bill them out to, at multiples of that. Typical consulting model, like when I was at Deloitte, they paid me about 1/10 what they would bill me out at. And so I wanted to try my hand on with my skill set. Could I just do it on my own and check the box on that? Second business, and that was bootstrap. Second business was called NBA Zone. I started that with co-founders at Wharton. It turned into the first virtual community for MBA students, alumni, as well as prospective MBAs. It was all ad supported. I sold a lot of the early advertising. We bootstrapped it. Ultimately decided that it wasn't my passion. Sometimes you have to try something to decide.
Yeah,
Um, Sold my shares to my co-founders and they ran with it. And it never became anything really significant, but it's kind of ironic because it was way before Facebook and it had a lot of those types of features, right? But we just were not passionate. I was not passionate, at least I can say, about selling ads. I just was not. I just couldn't do it. And I have this whole rant on that, social media enragement equals engagement. That the original model of making it ad based meant that you had to capture people's attention in a way where, you know,
sure.
it's not, the algorithms aren't set up too well. Jonathan Haidt's new book on that is a whole great read about this, this anxious generation that we're raising on social media. But my third business um, was called Body Matrix, and it was one of the original e-commerce sites selling sports nutrition products. I built the e-commerce engine from scratch. Again, bootstrap, did that with my wife. And we sold all over the world, all these nutrition products, things like power bars, protein powders. I've always been a huge workout enthusiast. I've been working out really obsessively since I was probably 14. One of my claims to fame as an older guy now is I can do an over 20-minute daily plank, just like a single plank for
Wow,
that long. So I've written about that. It's just requires a lot of discipline to build up to that. And
absolutely.
you gotta give yourself a lot of grace where you build up to it over a very long period of time. Americans tend to want to do everything like immediate. And a lot of businesses are built methodically, and your body is the same way as opposed to just giving grace and patience. But it was cool, like to do that. We were in the very early stages of e-commerce. That led to starting Core Metrics. Core
When
Metrics.
when you get a chance, listen to one of our podcasts. It's with a guy Sam, who was a mentee of mine, and he worked for me at one point.
Uh-huh,
Went off to just to start a company with his two young buddies, and
uh-huh.
that company sold for over 600 million. It's RX Bar.
I know RX Bar. Actually, I saw that episode's on your podcast, and I was like, "That's going to be cool." Because yeah, I know RX Bar. That's a really really cool. Uh,
Sam is amazing young man. His two partners are also. They're three really neat guys, and they have their own family offices and doing amazing things with that. Right. But anyway, so I just
yeah,
had to mention that.
yeah. So I mean, so that was it was really really cool. Um, but I became much more interested in the picks and shovels side of that. So I built a lot of analytics into our e-commerce platform because growing up in my parents' store, I could see how people were navigating, having trouble finding what they're looking for. They wanted to be able to ask us questions. E-commerce, everything was blind. Everything was hidden behind a web browser. So
Sure.
the first product we came out with at Core Metrics is called Illuminate, with a little E and a, and a big L, kind of the e-commerce era, the beginning of it. And we illuminated what's happening inside that black box so that you could run your business better. I wrote my leadership paper at Wharton on Sam Walton, his book Made in America, which is an amazing book about running a business and really being obsessive in studying your customers. And so, Core Metrics became a big outcome. A lot of pain with Core Metrics though, because we had 100.com clients within our first year. I mean, they were just like, this is what we've been waiting for. We've been flying blind. And they literally had been flying blind. And that's why they hit a wall, right? Because there was no financial discipline,
Mhm.
and advertising and everything else. So we came a little bit too late to save them. The .com bust occurred. We went from 100 customers down to three, had to let go of 2/3 of the staff, to build back up. But then we won Walmart, et cetera. Eventually had around a $300 million outcome to IBM and became their foundational analytics stack for e-commerce. All of that led to Bazaar Voice, which popularized customer reviews around the world.
This is number five business, right?
That's number five. And Bazaar is Bazar. So it means voice of the marketplace. And I wanted to symbolize that word of mouth, I'm sure word of mouth through a paving business, et cetera, is the most important form of marketing. It's the voice of the marketplace. If someone tells you about a movie you want to see, that's gonna have a lot more impact on you than an ad about that movie because you trust that friend. That's the way we've always been wired since the beginning of the early bazaars. Word of mouth plays a huge role. I wanted to amplify that online. We started when there were only three retailers in the United States who had customer reviews. So it was very rare. Like Amazon was one of them. Um,
Wow.
we were like, we're going to Amazon, fy the rest of the world around customer reviews. Bazaar Voice today is worth probably over 4 billion. It's led by a very good friend of mine, Keith Nealon. It's probably on a path to be worth over 10 billion. It's really, really exciting how that business has grown. I was the CEO and founder all the way from inception to over $1 billion IPO. After that, I tried to retire for a while because I've unfortunately lost both my parents. And I wanted to try on kind of their lifestyle version of entrepreneurship, that conversation with my dad, keep life simple, rattle in my head a little bit and be like, okay, well, let me just try it on for size. I decided that wasn't me. That wasn't my core nature, but I needed to go through that journey to find out. And it was a really soulful journey of, about 2.5, 3 years of traveling the world, really doing some things I always wanted to do, like start a blog. I became entrepreneur residents at UT Austin. I've done that numerous times at the Wharton School. I started to invest in startups as well out of our family office, which is called Herd Family Investments. And I got that helper's high, but I was really missing being back in the arena. That's when I started data.world. And
What year was that?
yeah, so I started data.world with my co-founders in 2015. And we started out with a 3-phase plan. And phase one was build a community around open data sets, things like you find on data.gov. We now have over 2.7 million people in that community. And then phase two would be commercialize on enterprise. And we came out with a data catalog, data governance platform, and data operations platform. People like Will O'Donnell at Prologis know a lot about it because they're big users of it. But basically, think about it as a data operating system, if you will, for all of their employees, where they can get access to the data they need with the right governance in place, and really understand that data. And now we're in this AI era where our most recent product is called the AI Context Engine, where you can take that data inside a company and it forms kind of this enterprise brain, if you will. Data are just facts about the business. And that enterprise brain can then communicate with large language models to get that productivity boost and solve the hallucination problem for enterprises because they want to use LLMs, but they don't want them to hallucinate. It can,
Yeah.
the accuracy problem, it can solve the governance problem, and it can solve the explainability problem. And those are really big problems for companies, but they want that productivity lift. They know that that productivity lift is going to be amazing. And the ones that become AI enabled early are going to have a huge, huge, huge advantage over their competition from an expanding margins perspective, expanding revenue perspective, better customer sat. And one of the most recent videos I put on YouTube was me ranting on how AI is going to lead to a whole new level of employee joy. Because who wants to drudge through work when you can automate a lot of the drudgery and therefore
Yeah.
exert a lot more creativity? And by the way, that's the basis of all capitalism and all humanity, starting with the invention of fire, where we could cook food and, grow bigger brains. So I'm really, really excited about both data.world and this time we're in from an AI perspective, as I was complimenting your son, because we're in the most exciting time in the history of tech. And one of the things Steve Jobs said is tech just builds layer upon layer on itself. AI builds on everything that came before, including an open internet. So what an exciting time to be alive, and
Amazing time, right?
and
We're
be
so
really
close.
exciting to see AI applied to everything. And Data World's raised over $150 million. We have lots of federal customers, lots of university customers, lots of customers in every vertical, financial services, healthcare, you name it. And it's a really exciting time for our company.
Oh, man, what a small world. To know Will O'Donnell is your friend and mine.
That is a small world. Yeah.
And he's in San Francisco, right? And you're in Austin. I'm in
I'm in
Chicago.
Austin. Yep. Yep.
He
Yeah.
actually Venture Group is a partner in that company, Site Technology. So
That's
not
great.
only are customers, but they and a couple of venture capital
He's
groups.
truly one of the great guys in venture. I mean, I've been, I bootstrapped my first 3 businesses, as I just explained, but the last 3, I've all kind of taken the rocket fuel approach of VC capital to create a bigger outcome faster and really impact the world in a faster way. Capital has become very institutionalized in that way. And I think that lets us progress faster as humanity, which is great. So I with the perspective of working with lots of VCs over a long period of time, and Will truly is one of the best.
He's one of the best. He's such a great guy, such a
Yep.
fun-loving guy as well, right? So he's so much fun to be around. Smart as can be, really, really a creative guy, and he comes from a great history of business. So, but again, when I look at that, I bootstrapped, and not really, in my opinion, in like any I don't give myself a lot of credit, but I only knew to bootstrap for the first 20 businesses I ever started. And so, nowadays I've started about 40 companies over the course of 43 years. Just these little companies that are doing blue collar stuff that some have become large companies. But overall, right, bootstrapping is the only way I knew. But man, what could I have done if I actually raised capital? I maybe not as much equity, but I had equity in some bad deals too, right? That might have helped me. So either way, when I look at this nowadays, when I raise capital, it's people like Will, only because they can add great value to the team, not because
Yep.
I need the capital anymore, right? But when you add somebody like, Will's group, and we've got an amazing board member, actually kind of two board members from his organization that are such invaluable people, right, on that board. It's so worth it, right, to partner with great minds like that. So
It
only,
really is. It's one of the great joys, right? It's
yeah.
you know,
So hey,
you
all right,
don't fall alone on this, you know.
we've gone over the time you gave us, and we're
Thank
going
you.
to beg you to do a second one, because I want to get deeper into the businesses, because your businesses are amazing, and so many people want to hear the little details of the tough times, the good times, all that. So we're going to beg you to do that, and if you do that, we appreciate it. Um, Chris, anything, because we've got to let this all-star go, and but Chris, let's just figure on that, okay? If he doesn't do it, we're gonna guilt him into it eventually when he's 70 or 80 years old and he's got more time.
I'll be an entrepreneur for a long time. Well, hey, I really enjoyed this, and yeah, we'll definitely schedule that. But real honor, and keep up the great work. I'm sure it's helping a lot of people out there, and it's great to see. And congrats on a 4.9 star rating too. That's unusual in podcast land.
Well, thank you. The honor is ours, 100% ours, and we really appreciate your time. And we're coming back at you, brother. So thank you so much.
And by the way, that 4.9 star rating comment is coming from a guy that popularized customer reviews all over the world. It's-
Oh, really?
I mean, Bizarre Voice has over 30,000 customers today. And almost every time when you're interacting with customer reviews online on any retailer in the world, Bizarre Voice is powering that. It's the software as a service powering that inside. So
Wow, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Awesome.
average review in the whole world is a 4.3 out of 5 star across all products. And then you can benchmark countries against each other. So 4.9 star is really good. So feel happy about that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, and thanks for being on. And we're coming after you again, brother. And also, I
Great.
want to connect with you. I would love to connect you someday with my son Austin. You guys will love each other. He's a huge leader in YPO as well. He's a leader in the chapter in Chicagoland area. He's just a really good guy, a great guy like yourself, modest as can be, smart as can be, and blessed he's my son, or I'd probably be digging ditches still.
All right. See ya.
Great
Thank you.
to see you. Thanks
Yeah,
a lot.
Okay.